Okay, what we're going to do today is we're going to go over how to swap the parts over from your Mossberg 500 to the Black Aces tactical receiver, which accepts the modified Sega mag. Included with your Black Aces tactical receiver are obviously the receiver. This is your mag kit. This is specifically for stick mag, for converting the Sega mags, AGPs, Sega SGM mags. This is the replacement piece for the back of the mag. This piece right here is a piece that pins into a drum. We do not have a drum to demonstrate that with, and I do not have a mag to demonstrate the installation of this kit, but we'll do so in another video. In addition to the receiver in your kit, you get a new bolt. You also get a longer firing pin, and this piece, I want to call it a carrier, but it's not a carrier. It's the bottom piece of the bolt that slides and aids in the lockup. As you can see here, here's the Mossberg 500 that I have. The receiver itself is about 1.5 inches longer than the original receiver. One thing that you want to make sure that you do before you even start in transferring parts over is make sure that you have a working Mossberg 500. If you don't have a working Mossberg 500, you're just setting yourself up for trouble. Another thing that I want to go over before we even start, this handguard on this Mossberg 500 is going to have to be modified. On another build where we use the same exact shotgun, this handguard rubbed on the bottom part of this receiver, and what it did is caused a function problem. You could not move the handguard back far enough to operate the action properly. So this handguard, what I'll do is I will probably mill a good portion of it off and then replace it when I'm done. Some of the tools that you're going to need: a screwdriver or a wrench for taking the buttstock off. Also another small screwdriver for taking the screws out of the butt pad that go into the buttstock. Strap wrench for removing the magazine tube. You might be able to get this by hand. I don't know. I guess mileage varies. Safety glasses, just in case. We'll be using a punch, a hammer to use upon the punch, an assortment of punches. I actually picked up two 1/16 of an inch punches for removing the pins out of the bolt. And that's just generally my punch assortment. You never know what you're going to need to use. You might, if you have it, like a 1911 disassembly block, those hard plastic type rubber type blocks. If you have access to one of those, you might want to use that for helping to remove the pins from the bolt. Or you can just use a block of wood. I'm not going to show you guys how to drive the pins out, but I will show you where the pins are at that you need to drive out. So we're going to start by disassembling the shotgun. Take the two screws out of the butt plate right here. There's going to be a bolt or a bolt with a flathead type bolt in there where you can use a screwdriver on it. You're also going to want to punch out the pin here, and that'll allow you to remove your trigger group. Obviously unscrew the barrel takedown nut right here so you can pull the barrel out, and from there we'll get the other bolt components and whatnot out of the shotgun. Okay, now as you can see, we have the buttstock off. You got your butt pad. I left the screws stuck in the butt pad so they don't wander off. The buttstock, this plastic buttstock's kind of cheesy. It'll probably get replaced with some sort of unit that has a pistol grip on it. And your buttstock bolt. Here's your trigger group. You're not going to do anything to your trigger group. Your pin that secures the trigger group into the receiver. And obviously you can see that the barrel is removed. When you go to remove this barrel from the action, you'll want to put the bolt about midway point to get the barrel out of the action easily when you remove the takedown nut. Now, the things that we have left are the little gates. We're not going to use those. that piece right there. We're not going to use that. There's also another one in here. Okay, you got to get both of these gates out of there before you can get the handguard and the action bars out of the receiver to get the bolt out. So now we'll be able to pull the action bars and the handguard out. This is the one-piece style of handguard, which is common to the Maverick 88s. I don't know why this Mossberg 500 has it. It must be the Econo version of this shotgun, but we're going to go ahead and remove that. So that's off the shotgun. Okay, so you're going to slide the bolt forward, and then you should be able to lift that out of there. And the gate's going to want to come with it. So you need to just take it out the front there, and the last thing to come out will be that gate, and that you can just take a screwdriver and just pop it out the side. There's 2 pins, they go into the receiver. If you can see those in there, just pop them out and lift that out, and you should be able to get that out of there. You just got to give them a little squeeze to get them out of there. Another thing that you're going to have to get out of this receiver is your safety, which you can see the safety block right there by my thumb. You're going to do that from unscrewing it right there. You're going to have a spring, a ball detent, so be very careful you don't lose that ball detent. That's pretty easy to explain with the removal of that. And just unscrew it. Keep track of your parts. Okay, now we have almost all the parts stripped from the receiver except for the magazine tube, and what I'm going to do with that is I'm going to put that in a vise on my milling machine and just vise it up there, wrap a cloth around it so I don't damage the receiver, because you might actually want to pick up parts for this and rebuild it into another shotgun, or parts that you pull off of your Black Aces build you might end up putting back onto this receiver, because like I said, this handguard's a little on the cheesy side, so I'll probably upgrade that to something better. You can end up building yourself another shotgun out of your old receiver. Okay, you can see I got the strap wrench on there. I actually got it broke loose. I had to use a larger strap. Just be very patient with it. You just got to break the it's got some Loctite on it right there. Once you break that loose, it should all be smooth sailing from there. We do have one more thing we have to remove. And you can see that screw in there, that flat screw with the flat for the flat head in there, and that's the ejector. You need to unscrew that and transfer that into the new receiver. Hey, be very careful with that screw. There's not a whole lot of threads on it, and the threads are very fine, so be very careful with it. When I transfer this extractor over to the new receiver, I'm also going to use a large punch to bottom it out in the slot that it fits into before I put the screw in. You don't want to have first off, there aren't enough screw threads there to tighten it down that way, and secondly, you do not want to use the screw to tighten that extractor up to the side of your receiver. So you want to make sure that you use a punch and you push it down there as far as you can before you insert that screw in place. Okay, so now we have all the parts out of our receiver. Here's that ejector and the screw right there. We're going to begin by inserting the ejector and the screw back into the new receiver, and then we'll also attach the magazine tube with the spring and the thing that pushes the next round out, which obviously you won't be using this anymore technically, so you don't need it. You know, people are coming up with different ideas that they can store stuff in it and all sorts of stuff. You know, you can search all over the forums on the net about that. It's not really something that I'm interested in doing. I'm not a survivalist or anything. I just like playing with cool toys. So we'll get going on this. Also, when I get that magazine tube back on, I'll show you what's going on with this style handguard and that tube And you'll see what I mean with that, because some of you also might run into that problem as well. Okay, be very patient when you're putting the screw back in the new receiver. You know, you don't want to cross thread it, and like I said, make sure you use a punch and bottom this ejector into the area that it's supposed to fit into in the receiver before you begin inserting the screw. So you see now that that screw is inserted, so we're going to go on to move on to assemble the magazine tube to the new receiver. Mossberg's kind of funky compared to some of the other shotguns I've worked on, like the Model 1897s and some of the others, and that spring is captured in this tube. So what I like to do is put the spring in there and the follower, and just keep your thumb over it and bring it close to the receiver and just slide it down and into the hole. If you're not very careful during that process, it's going to shoot that follower halfway across the garage or your shop, and possibly even the spring. So just be very careful when you're doing that. It'll save you a lot of frustration. Okay, now we got that in place, let's go over what we're not going to use for the rest of this build. We're not going to use this piece. We're not going to use these pieces, which are the gates that allow the shells to fall into the carrier when you rack the action. You're not going to use this old part of the bolt, which is the bottom part of the bolt. We still need to remove pieces from the bolt, which are going to include the firing pin and the extractors on both sides. When we go to remove those pieces, and the locking mechanism that's in the bolt and its pin, we're not going to use the firing pin, but we are going to use the firing pin hardware, and we're going to transfer that to the new bolt, but we'll go over that separately. On the bolt, you're going to have 3 pins you're going to have to remove, and they're very hard to see because this is black. There's a pin right here which secures the firing pin in. It's a real tiny pin. You're going to need a 1/16 punch. There's also a tiny pin right here and a tiny pin right here, and also you're going to have another pin right here that you're going to have to remove, if you can see that. To remove the ejector pins or extractor pins and the firing pin, retain pin, I'm going to do it from the bottom side of the bolt. So be very careful during this process. Those pins are very tiny. If you end up breaking one, the spring stock you'll have to use to build a new pin is .071, and that's commonly available at any of the hardware stores that stock spring material and whatnot. You know, those places that have brass and the spring material and all that good stuff. If you do a lot of gunsmithing, you're very familiar with that. So I'm going to go ahead and start pulling these pins out, and then I'll show you what we have left. Make sure when you get these extractors off that you place them on the side of the bolt that you're going to return them to. They need to go to the correct side. So the one on the right side is going to go to the right side of the new bolt. The one on the left side is going to go on the left side of the new bolt. There's also a little washer that's in here that goes up against the back of the bolt. If you take apart your bolt and you realize there's some strange funky washer here, well, there's a washer right there, and it goes up against the back of the bolt, and the spring butts up against that. We're almost at the end of the bolt disassembly. Getting the pins out is fairly easy. Just make sure you have something good to work against to drive them out. To get the locking mechanism out of the top of the bolt, you're just going to pull straight up, give a little push from the underneath, and then the rest of your material, which will be your firing pin, spring, and that washer, will pull out the back. And basically that's all there is to the bolt disassembly. And there's that little washer right there that I was talking about. The mystery washer is what I like to call that one. So what we're going to do is we're going to start putting this back together. We're going to start by putting the firing pin and the locking mechanism in the new bolt. Alright guys, just to let you see what we got going on here, I'm going to show you a few things real quick. This is the pin that secures the locking mechanism, which rides on top of the firing pin there. Your left extractor, your pocket spring. You're going to have two of these pins. One of these pins is going to be a short pin, which goes on the left side, and one of these pins is going to be a long pin, which goes on the right hand side. And here's your right extractor and your right pocket spring. Also, something else I didn't go over when we started the video is, and I didn't see these, I thought maybe they shorted me, these little hex screws that you put in, the Allen screws. They're Allen screws, whatever you want to call them. You're going to have a total of, I believe, six of them. Two of them are larger and they go through the side here, and that's for attaching accessories. You got a hole on each side, and the other four go into the top for scope rings or some other mount that you might want to put up top there. You want to make sure you have the correct hex keys or Allen keys to install those. Alright, back to bolt assembly. Important note, when you go to reassemble your bolt, do not use the old firing pin. Use the firing pin that came supplied with your new receiver. It's longer, and it is longer for a reason. Alright, so we have the locking mechanism and the bolt installed back in there. I need to put the pin back in place and put the pin in to retain the firing pin. And then we're going to go ahead and start putting the extractors back on the bolt. Kind of an important note here for those of you that don't know much about putting firing pins back into firearms. When you go and put this retaining pin back in here, make sure that you put a little pressure on the firing pin from the back there. It helps to get the pin in there a little bit easier. Otherwise, you're going to be pounding on that pin, and more than likely you're going to break it, and then you're going to have to make yourself a new pin or order another pin. So put in a little bit of pressure on the back of that to take some of the spring tension, or put a little bit more spring tension on it, so that way that pin can go through there a little bit easier. Another small tip for you guys that have never done anything like this before: when you're going to put your extractors back in, line it up with your spring in place and put your punch in from the bottom. What that does is that lines up that hole, so when you're driving the pin in through the top to secure it, it makes it a lot easier to put the pin in, so that way you also don't break a pin off. You can do the same thing with the firing pin when you're putting the firing pin, retaining pin back in. So now I'm going to go ahead and put the last pin in the top of this, and then the bolt will be completely assembled. Okay, now the bolt is complete. Make sure that none of your pins are hanging out, or there's not any burrs where you were driving the pins in and out of, so that way your swap job is a nice clean job. So you can see there, that's our new bolt that's going to go into our new receiver. There is one more thing that we need to do before we start putting parts into the receiver, is we need to put the safety back, which is going to kind of be a little bit of a pain in the butt. You might need an extra set of hands. If you don't have an extra set of hands, make sure you have a cloth down on the table, because that little detent, it can wander off on you. You don't have to wait for another one to come in the mail, or maybe even if you're lucky, your hardware store may have another detent ball that's that size. But be very patient in the process of returning the safety back to the farm. Also, another thing, in case you forgot, the safety block which goes in on the inside is going to go into the receiver like so. Doesn't make any sense if it goes in like this. The angles don't even fit right, so just an FYI in case you forgot, it's going to go back into the gun like so. Okay, here's another note for you, for anyone that needs to modify a handguard. If you can see there's a spring in this handguard, and you notice that it goes up against the front of the receiver there. You want to make sure that that handguard can move all the way back. Before, mine was binding at about right here. That's going to pose a problem, not only for inserting the internals and everything else, but it's going to short stroke, and that's going to cause some feed issues. So now it can move all the way back. And you can see here I removed a significant amount of material there. It's not fully cleaned up yet. I got to trim some of the flash off, but that's where we're at with that right now. Okay, now that we got the handguard fitted so we can insert the bolt a little bit easier, what we're going to do is we're going to insert the bolt, I guess. So insert it back in the way you got it out, except obviously you have a different receiver now. You're going to fit it in between those rails. Just kind of leave it back here. You still have to insert that carrier piece, and that carrier piece is going to sandwich on top. You can see right here, here's the other part of the bolt. I want to call it the carrier. See that little piece right there? That's going to go forward, and this is going to go up so you can see it from the bottom of the receiver like so. So that little protrusion is going to go down into the receiver or up against the top of the bolt. Okay, one thing you're going to have to do in order to get this to move forward is you're going to have to push down on this. That way that bolt lock pushes into the receiver, so that way you can slide this down on top of it and push it forward, so that way it can run forward. Otherwise you're going to get into this problem right here of the bottom part of the bolt not catching in the action bars. So you need to push down with maybe a thumb, a little bit of spring pressure, push down on it, and then push it forward underneath where the mag release is at. Just be patient when you do it. Like I said, push down here, and when you're doing that, also pull forward on the handguard, and it'll slide forward for you. And then now the bolt is installed in the receiver, and we can begin assembling or putting back the trigger group, which you should already know how to do that. So insert your trigger group and put the pin back through the side. Alright, next to last, we're going to go ahead and put these little Allen screws in the top of the receiver and the sides of the receiver. You're going to have two tiny ones that go in through the sides right there, and then you're going to have these four larger ones that go in through the top. The Allen screw on the top is a 5/64. The ones on the side are a 1/16 of an inch Allen key. Okay, the last thing we need to address is going to be the barrel. Now, this area is easy to point out right here. You can see this is a locking area. That little tab that's on the top of the bolt that locks into this. And where you're going to have a problem here is when it strips a fresh shell from the magazine, a shell may want to catch right in this area here, this flat spot right there. So what you're going to want to do is bevel that towards the chamber. Also, on the inside right here, there's a 45-degree chamfer along the outside right here. You're going to want to continue that chamfer on around to this point right up here where that tab is on the top of the barrel. I'll take a digital photo of that so you can see that a little bit better. It's kind of hard on video here. Okay, there's a picture of a dummy shell in there. You might be able to pick up some of the modifications that I made, and it's really hard on video, but I'll take some really good still shots so that way you can see some of the areas I chamfered. But that's the last item in concern on this build, and I hope everyone had fun with this build. We'll do a mag video when the mags come in, and a test video. Bye.